Hello everyone, and welcome into Going to Attic Space. My name is Jason Boning, and I am the owner of Uni-Serve Air Conditioning here in Houston, Texas, where we maintain, repair, and replace heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems all across this great city. Today, I want to talk about winter indoor air quality. Now, in Houston, you may be thinking, what winter? We don't have a winter. Well, that's kind of the case, but if you live in Houston, you know that winter is really probably the nicest time of year for us. The temperatures are very mild and very enjoyable. We spend a lot of time outdoors during the winter. Now, we do have our cold fronts that come in and it gets really cold, but for the most part, we have a lot of great days where we're hovering in, say, the 50s and 60s, and it's very nice. And what that can bring is actually a lack of use of our heating and air conditioning systems. And so what that can create is what we'd call kind of a stagnant indoor environment. And so we kind of want to discuss some of that today. Also, another thing that can happen is we have a lot of gas furnaces here in the Houston area. And if these gas furnaces get really old and have some cracks in the heat exchanger, we can create carbon monoxide, and that can be introduced into the space. And those are definitely some really negative things that we want to avoid. So we want to discuss some of those winter indoor air quality issues, and I think a good place to start is, what is indoor air quality? Simply put, it's the quality of the air inside your space. It's also referred to as IAQ. If you've ever heard IAQ products or IAQ solutions, those are products that are meant to help improve the indoor air quality. So once again, it's simply indoor air quality is simply the quality of the air in a space. The things that I want to look at are the things that can negatively affect the indoor air quality. And there's really four things that we can measure, anyways, as an air conditioning company that negatively affect the indoor air quality. Those are particulate matter, chemicals, carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide. Got to kind of emphasize those there. So CO2 and CO. So let's look at those things and discuss what each of those are to begin with. Particulate matter, those are the particles that are floating in the air. They can come from outside of the space or inside the space. So for example, in our homes, we can have dust blow through minor openings in windows and doors, or when doors are open, lots of opening and closing of doors. There's a lot of the particulate matter that can blow inside the home. Also, as humans, we have a lot of dead skin cells that fall off our bodies and enter into the air around us. I know that sounds pretty gross, but that's actually where a large portion of dust comes from. Just our bodies, our dead skin cells, even hair. If we have pets, our pets can produce dust, if you will, those dead skin cells and hair and all that stuff. There's other things inside our home that can create dust when we cook, or other various things can produce dust, which, as I said, just particulate matter, these particles that end up floating in the air. So I know that sounds kind of gross, but that can definitely be happening inside our homes. Also, things like mold and mildew, we classify those as just particulate matter. As an AC company, we can't really test mold. We're not mold experts per se. We don't have the testing and remediation kits. We do have some solutions that can deactivate mold in your ductwork or even in the air, but we don't have the ability to test for mold in particular. So what we do to test indoor air quality, it simply just categorizes those things as particulate matter. Okay, so that's a little bit on particles. Now, to get into some of the details here on particles, so if it's smaller than 2.5 microns, then we can actually breathe it in. It can enter our lungs and go into our bloodstream. And so some of those very, very microscopic particles can negatively affect our health. And so that's why we got to take a look at these things that are floating around in our air. All right, that's enough on particulate matter. Next up, chemicals. You also may have heard the term VOCs, volatile organic compounds. These can come from the various chemicals that we have in our home, such as cleaning chemicals. There's also building materials that we have in our homes. Think about floors, carpets, even furniture. All of these things can off gas, and this kind of off gassing process creates these VOCs that then essentially float around in the air. They can irritate our eyes, our nose, our throat. We can even breathe it in. And once again, these things negatively affect our health. Moving on, we have carbon dioxide, CO2. And so I'm sure most of you know that when we breathe, we breathe in air, which has a lot of oxygen, about 20% oxygen, which we need to live. But then when we breathe out the gas, which is CO2, carbon dioxide. And as I mentioned before, when your AC system's not running and you're not bringing fresh air into the home, then what can happen is if there's multiple people in the home, it can build up CO2 inside that space. So whether it be an office building, your home, whatever space it is, if there's not a lot of what we call air changes happening, then the CO2 levels can rise as we simply just sit there and live and breathe out CO2. And so that's something that we want to be aware of. If you start to get high levels of CO2, it can actually lead to a lower cognitive function and some other negative health issues. And so that's why we want to keep those CO2 levels low and keep nice, fresh air into the space. All right, lastly, we have carbon monoxide. So simply CO. Okay, so very similar to carbon dioxide, CO2, but just CO. Now, carbon monoxide is a poisonous gas that forms when there is incomplete combustion. All right, so let's talk about this. So in the Houston area, we have a lot of gas furnaces, and they heat our home by burning natural gas. And that happens inside a heat exchanger. Okay, so in your furnace, you have a heat exchanger. Think of it as simply some tubes that are inside your furnace, and the natural gas is essentially blowing into these tubes, and it's being lit on fire. All right, for that, and that's how this combustion process is happening. And you have this fire that's burning inside these tubes. All right, and so we want to keep that inside the tubes, and then the air in our home is circulated across the outside of the tubes, and it is then warmed up. All right, so it's a heat exchanger, so we're exchanging heat, and so we're warming up the air, continuing to circulate it through our homes to make us nice and comfortable, all right, on those cold days that we have. So if there is a crack in one of those tubes, if there's a crack in the heat exchanger, then what's happening inside can start to leak outside into that airstream. And that's when we can have issues such as carbon monoxide. So natural gas is primarily methane, which is a hydrocarbon. And during the combustion process, we mix that with oxygen, and then the byproducts that are created from that combustion process are carbon dioxide, which is CO2, water, which is H2O, and nitrogen. All right, so those are, in a perfect combustion process, that's the byproducts. As I mentioned before, carbon monoxide can happen when there's incomplete combustion. So in your furnace up in the attic, it's not a nice laboratory environment, so there's going to be a lot of that incomplete combustion that happens, and carbon monoxide can be formed. Now, when the furnace is working great, all of that combustion that's happening inside the tubes is then exhausted out of your house. So it's gone entirely, okay? That's what we need to happen. But if there's a crack, it's going to then be entering in the airstream and be introduced into that airstream, which is then entering your home. Now, that is something we can test for. When we come out and do maintenance on those furnaces, we can definitely test to see if there's any carbon monoxide that is being introduced into that airstream and entering the home. And so as we kind of transition into looking at some solutions then to help improve indoor air quality, we can start there with the carbon monoxide. Basic maintenance, having Uni-Serve come out a couple times a year. So in that fall check, we're going to check for carbon monoxide. We're going to check all those safety features on the furnace. That's really an easy one for us. If we detect that, we know that there's something wrong with that furnace. Most of the time, it's just really old and it's time to be replaced anyways. And so I say it's an easy solution because really we're just upgrading that furnace, getting a new one in place that's safe and not leaking carbon monoxide into your air. So that's how we take care of carbon monoxide. The next thing is we want to look at a strategy for air filtration and air purification. Air filtration, it involves using a filter to trap particles and various pollutants as they're passing through that airstream. So you probably have some air filters in your wall, maybe even in the ceiling, so that when your air conditioning system, heating or air conditioning system is running, it's sucking air through those, and that air is being filtered and then comes back through your house. Okay, so that's air filtration. Air purification, on the other hand, it involves using some type of technology to remove these various pollutants and contaminants, whether it be VOCs or mold or whatever it is. It actually deactivates those and removes them from the air using some type of technology. And that's usually like maybe a UV light with the UVC light spectrum, which can deactivate some of those organic compounds. So you may have air filters and maybe even some type of air purification device. But as I mentioned before, in the wintertime, if your system's not running, then those, you're not doing any filtration, you're not doing any air purification. So if it is wintertime and the temperatures are low and you're heating, I would recommend turning your system to fan on and just letting that system run and circulate air and filter it and purify it in your home. Now, if it warms up a little bit and that humidity starts to rise in the air outside and we start to switch over to cooling, then I would recommend changing the fan back to auto. Anytime we're in cooling mode in the Houston area, we have to keep those fans set to auto. If we keep it to on and it's running all the time and we're not cooling, we're cooling, but your system's not actively cooling, meaning the condenser's not on, that compressor's not running, then what we can do is we can build up humidity inside your home. And we really want to avoid that. We don't want to get high humidity in the home. So really the rule of thumb I like to think is if you're heating, you can keep the fan on. That way you can get some good air circulation. If you're in cooling, keep it to auto. Okay, so some rules there to follow. So once again, when we're running that system, we can get some good air filtration and even air purification if you have some type of air purifier. If we're still measuring high levels of chemicals and even carbon dioxide, then we need to look at something else. We need to look at a way to introduce fresh air into the space. And so what we can do is we can look at an energy recovery ventilator. Okay, ventilator in the HVAC sense, where we're introducing fresh air into the home, so that that's what a ventilator does. Is it's putting fresh air into the home. A lot of the newer homes have some type of fresh air device. It's by code, but a lot of times, if we're being honest, they're not installed properly. They may not even be hooked up all together, and so that's something we can take a look at and see if that's even operating properly. If you have an older home and you don't even have one because it wasn't required by code, then we can look at installing one and really getting some good fresh air into the space and exhausting some air out so that we're getting some good air changes in the home, keeping those carbon dioxide levels low and keeping good levels of oxygen in the home. So just to summarize there, we really want a good strategy for air filtration, air purification, and then if needed, we can even look at some type of ventilating device to get fresh air into the home and exhaust some of that air so that we have nice indoor air in your home with a good overall indoor air quality. So a great place to start is routine maintenance. We can look at your system, see how it's operating, even test that indoor air quality, and then give you some potential solutions to help improve that. I hope you learned something new today. I appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time.